So the U.S. searching for a crypto czar. I've heard rumors that it might be Charles Hoskins. Good friend of ours who's been on the show before, Rob. He's here to dispel the myth. Rob, this isn't happening, right? Charles Hoskins is not going to be the new crypto czar.
Yeah, no, I don't think he's going to be the new crypto czar because he's actually named the Coinbase CEO to who he wants to be the new crypto czar. I just don't think he wants to be in that sort of leadership position, but he's definitely going to be consulting with the government. I mean, he and Kennedy have a really good relationship, and they've worked together on other things. So this to me is a very promising thing. I mean, I personally would be okay with Charles being the crypto czar because I remember the last time Charles testified in Congress, there were all kinds of other crypto people, and they all talked about their own token. They talked about their own sort of projects, and Charles just got up there and he talked.
They're up there just shilling their own tokens. They're just like
exactly
trying to pump their own bags.
Exactly. Charles he talked about the industry and he talked about what was best. He didn't mention Cardano once, and to me that's like that. To me was a very enduring thing. But no, I think the Coinbase CEO is going to be the crypto czar. But in some ways, it's kind of up in the air.
Well, it kind of makes sense that Charles Hoskinson also has a project that is drawing his attention and building a lot. But I would love I always enjoy listening to Charles Hoskinson talk about blockchain and about politics, about finance. He has some very broad ideas. The Constitutional Convention that is going on with Cardano, notwithstanding.
Wait, we're day 2 of the Constitutional Convention. I've actually got that on the screen. So this is happening in Buenos Aires, and like, what is the Cardano community trying to figure out here with their convention?
Well, I mean, here's what I know. So Cardano is going to have essentially a budget. I mean, a huge budget, because one of the things that happens, and you can call it a tax or whatever you want to call it, is that for every transaction, there is a little bit of ADA that goes into a wallet that becomes the Cardano budget, right? So the Constitutional Convention, the members of the Constitutional Convention, the Constitution that's going to come out of it is basically responsible for doing things like establishing, what the network sort of parameters are going to be. But then they're also responsible for spending the money, just like any government. So the idea here is that they create a fully online sort of government. And I've said this before, that I think if a political scientist was studying this, I think they'd get something out of it. I mean, ultimately, it's a way to have vociferous disagreement and yet still get something done. And so, the way they sort of vote on things and stuff is sort of the precipitator of that. I think it's a really good thing. And I saw
is the voting all done on chain? Is it done through?
Yeah. So it's all voting. It's all done on chain. It's all done on I don't know what wallet. It's probably the Daedalus wallet where they do all that stuff and everything. One of the recent hard forks, one of the recent forks of Cardano basically allowed that voting sort of scenario. And now another one is, after this convention, what will happen is another hard fork will come into play, and all of this will be enabled then on the main net, on the primary network. And so it's a process, but to me, it's like an amazing thing. And it's scary because, I mean, we know that centralization, you can get stuff done, right? Because you can, if it's led from somebody who's in charge of something, they can just say, "Oh, go do that." And now the whole Cardano network is, you know, you can't do that anymore. Even Charles has no real power over it. And so I don't know, it's a risk, but I love it. I mean, I don't know if it's adding value yet to ADA. I'm not sure, but it could be, because I imagine some people are investing in this thing. You know, they always want to go to someone and say, "Hey, you screwed up," or "Hey, that was great," you know. But in this case, they're not going to have someone to do that. Even, like I say, even Charles, the Genesis keys have been burned. They've been handed over to the Cardano Foundation, and then all of that.
Yeah, that happened like a couple months ago, right?
It did. Yeah, it happened a couple months ago. Yep.
So, Lucas, you've been in Buenos Aires before. You gotta paint a picture for us, just a little bit about what it's like to be down there, because you were down there a few years ago, right?
I mean, I was down there almost 20 years ago, but I was down there when I always pay attention to Argentina because I really enjoyed my time there. And I went to Argentina in the wake of the depegging of the Argentinian peso to the dollar. So I was there in a time of a rampant amount of hyperinflation, and so that was that was a problem that Argentina still struggles to deal with till today. We know that Javier Milei is the president of Argentina and has enacted some draconian, drastic, some sweeping, I don't know what word to use, but some huge changes with how the government is to be run. And we see a lot of correlations made towards what our expectations of, say, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy want to do with our federal government. So I keep an eye on, you know, another thing interesting in Argentina is their base benchmark rate for their Federal Reserve, their gas tax, as we talk about, say the fee for transactions on Cardano is 35% right now, and was, I believe, 80% a year ago at this time. So as we have a massive amount of inflation going on in the United States, and a lot of that money going to service our debt. I think it took us 105 days to accumulate, what was it, $1 trillion of debt, and a lot of that was money going to service our debt. Actually, probably a lot of it was also created by Congress to send elsewhere in the world. But I think we need to keep an eye on Argentina and the things that they have to do with their money. But it's a beautiful city. Buenos Aires is a beautiful city. The Paris of South America, it likes to call itself. Great food, lots of beef, parrillas, grilled beef. I don't know what else I could tell you about Argentina. Good, it's got a good subway system too. And the subway system, I think, when I was there, I'll tell you this because it's interesting to think about in terms of hyperinflation. When I was there, most of the restaurants would and the grocery stores would keep their prices on a chalkboard. And they would send runners periodically to the subway system, and the runners to the subway system would come back and tell them what the price of a subway ticket was, because that was the one government institution that was running and providing a service to the people. And so you would base what the prices of your food and your meals were off of what the subway ticket price was. It's a fascinating system.
Wow, that's incredible. I never knew that. The last time I was in Buenos Aires, there was an accident with one of the trains, and I don't know, it hit something. It wasn't a bad accident. They just didn't stop in time, and they ran into one of the walls or something at the end of the track. And the government at the time decided, oh, we're going to take ownership of this thing, to, you know, presumably to solve the problem. But I'm not sure what happened after that. But you know,
have you ever ridden a bus in Buenos Aires?
Yep, buses and trains, yes.
Well, you know, the bus system I find also very interesting. because we ride the bus here in the United States, or the train, and the train in Argentina is like here. It's there's a monopoly that's granted to specific operators, but buses are different. If you want to drive a bus in Argentina, you buy a route, and you can have 20 or 30 buses that are driving the same route. And
It's kind of like a medallion system. You have to buy a specific chunk of the road.
I don't even know if there's a limit to, but they buy routes. And so the difference is there's no schedule. Supposedly there might be a schedule because the government maybe is in the business of getting enough, or providing the right price, or to pay out to get buses driving a specific route. But what happens is you have all of these buses that show up, back to back to back to back. You might wait 40 minutes and have 200 people waiting, but then all these buses show up and they're gone. And that might sound like a less than ideal system, but I've ridden the bus a lot in the United States, and I can tell you the amount of time that I've spent waiting for a bus in the United States is fourfold. And
Hmm.
part of what the difference is that there's it's not that there is no model for a reservation. There is, because when you take a long bus across country, or some of the first class buses, there is that concept of a reservation and a set time schedule. But when you get rid of the time schedule, and you have you're not running like on this expectation of reservations, I find it a much more efficient system. And sometimes I think about what is going to happen as we move to a financial system that looks a little bit more like that less regulated bus system, and how that's going to look for prices, for queuing. And it's something that I actually think is where our financial system is going to move towards that, shall we say, an on-demand system as opposed to a reservation system.
Wow. I mean, that is interesting. So I don't know if when you were in Buenos Aires, did you notice the parking mafia? I call them the parking mafia. So you go down some of the side streets, and these streets in Buenos Aires, in the neighborhoods and stuff, they're very quaint. They're very pretty. They're tree lined. They're full of beautiful green foliage and flowers and stuff. I mean, it gets chilly, but it doesn't get like Minnesota chilly. But on every street there's a group of people, typically young men, who, when somebody pulls in and takes a spot to park, they always come up to the driver and say, hey, we'd like you to give us a certain amount of money. And some people typically don't, or they do, depending on how they feel threatened by these people. But sometimes they'll knife your tires or something like that.
Yeah,
but
so it's a protection racket.
it's a protection racket. But I could see, in related to the comment you made before, I could see where some sort of decentralized currency and crypto could be used to manage this sort of in a better way. I get it. People, that is something we need more of here in the States. There is a plethora of non-recognized sort of economic activity that goes on behind the scenes. Like, even when you ride a bus or something, you'll have a kid come up and try to sell you socks or something like that. But there's just all kinds of unofficial activity, and we tend to, in America, we tend to frown on that a lot. But I think a crypto economy would allow that sort of unofficial economic activity a lot more freely and a lot better. And so, I mean, I found it really fascinating, kind of annoying sometimes. Like, you'd get on a bus and somebody would come up and try to sell you gum, or try to sell you socks, or try to sell you something else, right?
You know, for one, I've had that experience of the parking mafia in Houston, Texas,
Yeah.
and I used to just gladly pay it because, you know, well, I somebody come up to me and say, "I'll watch your car for $5." If you don't pay them $5, you don't know what's going to happen. You do pay them $5, maybe somebody watches your car. So I never had that experience in Argentina though, but that's because I also took a cab. Like there was a lot of cab drivers and buses, so I usually took public transportation when I was there. But you make a great point about all of the economic activity that goes sort of off the books, and that's part of Argentina's constant sovereign debt problems. But I do think that crypto, it forces the issue onto our governments, and I think this is part of the reason that we see um, Donald Trump talking about tariffs rather than the minute and the overbearing transaction taxes, the income taxes that our government currently relies on. And I think that whether people understand crypto or not, they do understand that they want to they want to feel like the transaction tax is built into the currency. And
Yeah.
so to bring us back to the Constitutional Convention, what a brilliant innovation. Like now we can have not just a decentralized database that records transactions, but also the users of that decentralized database are getting together and deciding what the fees for those transactions are going to be.
Well, I mean, what they're doing is every transaction that happens on the Cardano network, there's a certain amount that gets paid into a single place. And so the Constitutional Convention, what they're doing is they're going to figure out how are they going to spend that money that's been collected up from the fees that have been collected from the network. Is the fee fixed, Rob? Can they change it? Could the Constitutional Convention
Well,
say it should be 95% tax?
yeah, it's just a very small amount, and with Cardano being, and
But
I don't.
so is it baked into the blockchain? Can they change
Yes,
the tax
yeah.
rate?
So, however, it is a parameter that can be changed, and it is a parameter that the constitutional, the Constitution itself will have some effect on, because what they'll do is they'll vote on whatever that might be, and then it will go, and a parameterized change will be made, and it will be distributed to all of the node producers or the block producers on the network, and yeah, yeah. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if we could in the future have a situation where the the Department of Defense never fails its audits?
Well, this is kind of like what Kennedy was talking about when he said he wanted to put the government on a blockchain and put all spending to be able to have that accountability, to be able to have traceability. This is Yeah, these kinds of concepts, I think, are starting to be known, in the power of what you can do with a blockchain in a transparent ledger. Yeah, you don't have to fail an audit if you know where every penny has gone because everything's recorded into an immutable ledger. I think there's still opportunities for scams and grifts to happen because not everything happens on the blockchain, right? You buy a bunch of stuff and then that stuff disappears. That's that old mafia thing where, you hijack the truck and then there's other kinds of problems that happen, but at least you know where the money went and you can say, hey, what did you do with it?
Exactly. I mean, this is one of the things. This is one of the things about Cardano specifically, that, and maybe you can say the Bitcoin. When I say Bitcoin integration, I'm being magnanimous. I'm being, maybe I'm being positive. Who knows? But the Bitcoin integration basically demands that the keys, the keys are ours. In other words, the old adage about, not my keys, not my token, right? That's and so that is one of the integrational things that allow Bitcoin to be integrated, for example, with Cardano's, because the keys remain in self custody, and so that is ultimately the kind of advantage if we want to do something like have a have a government that is, fully within the realm of a DAO, for example, right? So it allows DAOs, but the Cardano network, because of its its security mechanisms, it's never gone down. It's in, I don't know how many years now, 7 years. We had a big DDoS attack, denial of service attack, a while ago, and it didn't really affect the network at all. Stuff like that. So it's that security that sort of allows the ability to do these DeFi with Bitcoin, for example. And so the self custody and the security. So I describe it as, and it is described as a native token. So when things do go bad, like, it's always because of personal issues. In other words, it's like somebody gets control of your seed phrase, and they are able to log into a wallet or something that you owned previously, or something like that, right? So those big bridge hacks, excuse me, they just don't happen. Oh boy. There.
Well, the Cardano community must be really excited about the Bitcoin. That talks about Bitcoin strategic reserve, and even I don't know if you guys caught Jerome Powell, but he said Bitcoin is like gold, not like the dollar. And I think what he, I don't think, I'm pretty sure what he meant by that was, we have this concept of currencies that we lay over on assets so we can establish some sort of baseline of trust. So when we know not just how Bitcoin is being looked at more politically lately, less of a currency and more as an asset to base other currencies on, especially cryptocurrencies, then Cardano building this bridge over to Bitcoin begins to look very interesting, and in using Cardano for financial rails and currencies that are laid over the top of Bitcoin. So,
right.
And what else is going on in so very very good for the Cardano ecosystem to build this relationship with Bitcoin, to begin to use the broader acceptance of Bitcoin across the world, and to I don't know, rise up and make a case for the use of Cardano. What else has been going on in the Cardano ecosystem? Because I know
there was some kind of high transaction thing, or a Doom tournament or something, right, Rob? What happened with that?
Yeah, that was so in the Cardano network, there's these you can call them a layer 2 solution, and I guess it is, but it's something called Hydra head. And basically you can get a whole bunch of Hydra heads together, and for each transaction for example, in this particular situation, they're playing Doom on Cardano. And for each, if you think about what has to happen in a game, like your mouse moves, the refresh rate on your screen is I don't know, 35 frames per second or whatever it is. A good game is, some of them are like 60 or 120 frames per second. And key depresses, and all the stuff that happens in a game, all that stuff is being in this particular instance to exemplify the ability of a Hydra head. All of those transactions, like the movement of the mouse and the depress of the key, whatever it is, whatever has to happen in a game, each refresh on the screen is being written to a Hydra head. And when you get and then what happens is they're asynchronous transactions, basically, that they build up over time, and then eventually they get written to the network, to the mainnet network, as a finished transaction. So essentially, you can get something like 1 million transactions per second. And it's even going to get better than that, because it depends entirely on how many Hydra heads you have out there. And so over time, this is going to get more and more and more. So, I mean, we're excited. I mean, I'm counting myself as a Cardano, I shill Cardano all the time, but I think it's for various reasons. I do that, not just because I have some investment in it, but it over time, more and more and more people are going to run Hydra heads, and it's expandable, it's scalable. So the more people you have running these Hydra heads, the more transactions you're going to be able to get. And then easily right now, as soon as we build the apps, they'll have a faster transaction speed than Solana could even potentially think of, but faster than what happens in the Visa network or the MasterCard network or something like that, right? I talk about, it's decentralized. I mean, it's sort of crazy to me to think that is something you could get 1 million transactions per second. So in other words, enough transactions per second to run a worldwide, credit card transaction sort of network that's faster than Visa, and it's decentralized. To me, that's sort of freaky, but it's being proven to be true here. I think it's incredible, and probably if there's one thing that's other than the fact that we're starting to go into altcoin season, I think it's one of the things that's really pushing the value of ADA as we go forward.
Yeah, speaking of that, do you think that some of this stuff that ADA has been able to demonstrate, that's why we see ADA doing a 3x rip? I mean, we've identified a couple of these. So Doge did this, Chia did a 3x rip, ADA's in that camp. So these are kind of these movers that are happening. Everybody's paying attention to the price of Bitcoin, but you've got some other coins that are in the blockchain space that have had these tremendous moves. And we're not talking over a long period of time here. We're talking over the last few months. It's pretty big price movement.
Yeah, I think one of the other thing that's happening, and I know this is kind of peripheral maybe, but Charles went to this retreat or something. It was like a Buddhist retreat or something like that. And he comes back from this retreat after being gone for like 7 days or something, and then he starts apologizing to all of the other sort of projects that he's sort of been, poo-pooing and beating up on, including a lot of the like XRP and I mean, he really did a number on these sort of projects some time ago, and so he's apologizing to them. And so I think some of it is because he's perceived a way to sort of work with them in ways that they haven't been able to do before. And so you get really nice Charles. You get Charles who supports the entire industry. You get those sort of positive sort of effects on the value of Cardano. So yeah, I think that has something to do with it too. But that's just primarily that's peripheral. But nice Charles versus bad Charles or unpleasant Charles.
I think that's a very interesting point to make, because I also see that arc occur over and over. Adopters to the Bitcoin maxis. We have so much maxism in crypto, and it all wants to replace the dollar. But I think a truer probability of what we're going to see in the future is a plethora of cryptocurrencies and decentralized databases that are going to be used for various things. It's interesting that Charles goes on a Buddhist retreat and comes back with a pantheism, a neo-pantheism that is money, and should be good for both Charles and Cardano.
Yeah, I think that's right. A pantheism, that's a great way to look at it. because that's ultimately what it is. So I think he's going back to that time because he knows that he's got an opportunity to work with government too, and he's got to be objective. And so you can say it's a strategy, sure, and it is certainly, because I don't think he feels that nice to some of these projects, but it is a strategy, and I think it's working. But on the opposite side, Bitcoin is also having a sort of renaissance of goodwill towards other things too. Like I hear all the time about previous Bitcoin maxis going, oh, hey, I think we're going to look into this other thing, and I think we're going to, I like Yago, the guy that the BitcoinOS guy, he's been really shilling on Cardano lately, but I notice he's starting to do other things too right now. So,
well, I think part of that may also be the more general acceptance of Bitcoin.
Yep.
People in cryptocurrency have talked about the counterfeiting of quantitative easing, the abuse of fiat systems, and people just didn't believe us. So, once people begin to accept that, the question becomes, what next? And we don't have to continually fight that battle. So I'm glad that we're moving into an era of cryptocurrency where governments are beginning to acknowledge it instead of fight it, and even considering things like a crypto czar and saying, how are we going to use these new technologies to move out of the past and moving out of, say, the denial stage of monetizing more and more debt and praying for some sort of solution that may never come in the future.
So I got kind of a question for you. I mean, so if you think about, if you extrapolate out, for example, Bitcoin becoming a reserve currency for the United States, do you think that it will provide an ability, for example, to control our debt a little better? So I think about something like gold. So the United States probably has the biggest gold reserves, but it never uses it to to control the debt at all. Or maybe it does in the background. I have no clue what it does with all that gold.
Well, it won't. It won't. Apart from that, it begins to open the door for the acceptance and the understanding of blockchain solutions, for decentralized database solutions. And because you can put gold in a box and write paper IOUs and tell people how much gold you have in the box. You can put Bitcoin in a box and do the same thing. But whether and there's another conversation about whether what actually exists in the box. But regardless, if you're operating off a fractionalized reserve system, the more that people trust it, the more paper will be stretched over the top of it. So no, I don't think that it will solve the problems of debt, but it does begin to walk us towards an acceptance and a getting away from physical things. And Bitcoin is an improvement over gold in that everyone can look at it and say, oh, it is in this place, it is in this wallet, in this vault. It has not moved. It has not been, Satoshis have not been siphoned off of a Bitcoin.
Well, that's the thing that you brought to my attention the other day, that you can't adulterate Bitcoin. Like gold, is it really 24 karat, or is it pure gold, or what do you really have here? Or is it just a thin veneer over a chunk of tungsten? That these things are very possible when you're talking about the shiny rock. But with Bitcoin, the network rejects any kind of attempt to adulterate Bitcoin, and all cryptocurrencies really have that same property, is that if it's sufficiently crypto, that it has those mathematical properties that give it that special way, it is superior in some sense, at least in this aspect.
And I think that's more broadly how many people are beginning to understand it, because there was a lot of pushback over one cryptocurrency to begin with. What are the security implications of using this? But as that began to be solved, like And with Bitcoin not having an inflation rate, this is why we start seeing so many in the traditional finance world beginning to acknowledge that it is a financial instrument, that it is an asset, that they want to hold it in reserve, because it takes a lot of work to actually know what is in gold. Like everyone likes to talk about, I'd rather be on gold. I can see it, I can feel it, I can pass it around, but you don't know. Like unless you're carrying acid and scales around, um, that's a tough thing to actually know what's being debased and what's happening with these metals. So
Reminds me of those old West movies where the guy would bite into the coin and be like, "Ah, yeah, that's a good piece of coin."
are
Or, that is a great thing. So my son just moved back from Rapid City, South Dakota, and he actually likes the politics and the people out in Rapid City more than he likes Minnesotans, but that's okay. He brought back, while he was out there, they he got involved in these things where they use these things called goldbacks. And what goldbacks are these, basically they're like dollar bills, or like bills, and they have a certain amount of actual gold in them, and they make a bill out of them. So in other words, like there's $5 or 100-ounce denominations, or 0.1 ounce stuff like that, right? And so you're right that it's very difficult to prove or to know what you have as far as gold goes. And that's sort of why I sort of am really up on this idea of tokenization. And if you think about and tokenizing real world assets and stuff like that, if you think about what if a bank, the fully reserved bank that Caitlin Long wanted to start in Montana, and at the time our government basically just poo-pooed it. We'd rather have no reserve banks rather than fully reserved banks, stuff like that. But what about a situation where gold is vaulted by some official organization, and then made a token out of, stuff like that? I mean,
I'm still wary of that, because you have to trust the vaulting. And even with those paper notes, if somebody handed me a gold back and I was a duplicitous person, I'd be trying to figure out what sort of aqueous solution I could soak it in to get rid of those little gold threads that are baked into the linen. And then I go pass around this linen note and keep all the gold to myself. So that's the inherent problem in gold. But you asked about earlier, does crypto or does Bitcoin solve the abuse of the supply of money? And I think that we're about to enter a stage whenever we begin to go back to this conversation about digital currencies, and we understand that digital currencies, stable coins, money that has rules, or distributed ledgers that have rules that are written in with regards to the supply of those tokens, are what we actually need to be doing. And Bitcoin solved that in that it had a limited supply, but if it's being reused as a reserve asset and money being built on top of it, that money can still be stretched. That's going to be another level of understanding that the world needs to broadly come to. But I think we're going to come to it a lot more quickly than an acceptance of the improvement of a digital currency, of a fixed supply digital currency over gold, silver, or whatever. The other thing that we need to get over is this notion of partial reserve banking and fixed reserve banking. Because if we are using networks that can ultimately agree on transaction, then we need to start thinking in terms of zero reserve banking. And when you have zero reserve banking, you can think of it like not in trusting that asset that underpins the currency, but the custody of where the currency or the asset or the token resides. And I think that is going to be maybe the most powerful thing that we see coming in the future, is that we get away from these notions of partial reserve banking or currencies that are stacked on each other for trust in that system, but instead we trust in the custody of it, and having having um, uh, having innovations in the blockchains that say require multiple signatures to move something, because you can see how that occurs with a verification of an asset. When you have when it takes three signatures to move a token, or to assign a token to an asset, a real world asset, you ostensibly have three different or multiple parties that are looking at something and verifying it. And so I think that is going to be the new innovation in understanding a difference in money, is we move away from we've moved away from whole reserve a long time ago, and partial reserve has been a 400 or 500 year catastrophe. So I think rather than trying to go backwards in time, we need to move forward. We need to understand zero reserve banking and how important custody is.
That is one of the reasons why I think this Cardano Bitcoin integration sort of thing is so powerful, because it allows self-custody of the token through the complete process. So there is a project, there's this thing. I mean, if you go to a website called verilidity.com, VERALIDITY.com, this is and essentially what it is, it's a place where someone could build a website, basically, an e-commerce website, and you can choose to it uses an oracle outside to determine the value of something, but you can choose as an app developer, as a company, to take whatever cryptocurrency you want to take. So it could be Bitcoin, it could be Cardano, it could be ETH, it could be XRP, whatever it is, right? And then this is the sort of thing you can just automatically include in your your website. So it gives you this opportunity to choose what you want. And so I don't know. It's when you combine this sort of thing with like I know algorithmic stablecoins have gotten a real hit, but you can have these things. You still need, for an algorithmic stablecoin, for example, you need to have some collateral. It has to be in like the one I'm thinking of in particular is called Djed, DJED, and what it does is it's an algorithmic over collateralized stablecoin, and it uses ADA as a stabilization factor behind the scenes. So it's like a 2-coin or 3-coin system, and it uses algorithmic stablecoin. So when we talk about zero reserve banking, I think we sort of have to get into this realm of two things. I mean, one of the first things is we have to think about actually paying fees or taxes to our government. I mean, I don't want to live in a world where I'm not protected physically by, a Department of Defense. I mean, I just think it would not be good for us to live in a world where the Department of Defense or some ability to protect its citizens from outside forces aren't there. And so, taxes are one thing. And then how are we going to get those taxes? And so I always go back to this idea of what Cardano is doing with its sort of thing, with its sort of constitutional convention. And as far as there's probably other tokens that do that sort of thing, but there has to be a way for us to pay for things.
Are there? I think that's pretty novel, honestly. I can't really think of too many other cryptos that have that. Maybe listeners to the show, you can fill us in on other suggestions, but I think it's actually pretty novel amongst Cardano to have done something like this.
I don't know of another one. And we have to do something. I mean, I think about point of sale transaction fees where some small amount goes into a wallet that is for taxes and stuff. I mean, and ultimately, I think this is the only way in the long run that this sort of stuff is going to work. A model like Cardano has, and so things like this Verility and Djed Stablecoins and what are over collateralized stable coins, it basically prevents runs. It does the same thing as essentially it becomes a fully reserve bank sort of philosophically, but it doesn't work the same way. But
well, I think you make great points as with the acknowledgement that if we're going to live in a civilized world and have governments that we don't fight against because we actually have input and a better return of the input and the agreement of the people that the government is enforcing the agreed upon rules of a group of people, then we also need to begin questioning where we have public banking and where we have like the idea converges of zero reserve public banking. If we have crypto decent public blockchains that are also for public assets or in some sort of public control, or there is a public wallet that receives from that. But we don't live in that world right now. We talk about the Federal Reserve as if it's separate or as if it's part of government, but it's not. Donald Trump does not get to tell Jerome Powell to step down. But the sad thing is we have a private central bank that now spans around the whole world. People are trying to get away from that, but it's not public, and this is part of our problem. And so we've given away the resiliency in private organizations of allowing multiple of them to occur and to check each other whenever we granted a monopoly to that private bank. But also it works against us to see or understand that as a public. We talk about the United States dollar, but really it's the Federal Reserve dollar, and it's a private dollar that's been granted a monopoly. So I do think that part of this what this new technology brings us or will bring us are monies that are public and where people do agree what they are going to spend on for not just defense, but also roads and libraries and other things that provide for the common good.
Right. This sort of brings to mind too. One of the things that the Cardano Constitution, it still does, and I kind of have a problem with it. And I think they will eventually solve the problem. But this idea of monetary wealth being a factor in voting power, right? So, DAOs have typically had this issue where you have governance tokens, and the people who are at the top have more governance power. They have more voting power. And so any sort of government official sort of DAO sort of thing where we have the rights to vote on something, it has to be set up as one person, one vote. And there's really no good way to do that. I mean, there hasn't been a good way to do that until very recently, because no one wanted to do KYC. And I get that. I don't want KYC either. That would be, we're probably going to find ourselves in a world where
Well, there's a difference between KYC and identity, right? And I think
Yes.
that's a real strong distinction that has to be made if you want to do something like that. Is to say, know your customer was something that was an enforcement tool to try to figure out what people were doing on certain types of networks to try to control behavior. But when we're talking about governance or voting, identity is separate from know your customer or anything like that, because there are ways to create identity that you don't have to reveal everything about yourself. And this harkens back to like what we talked about the last time you were on, like the identity products that are being delivered on Cardano.
Yep. Yep. I think that identity part, as you say, is probably the underpinning part that sort of lends itself to a system that is going to be necessary. And just recently, with the Minnesota Blockchain Initiative, I did a little presentation on blockchain voting, and I asked the question: can it even be done? Right? Can we vote on a blockchain? And the first thing that comes to mind is, can we vote on a blockchain without KYC? And I built a system that allows us to do that. But the base of that is this ability to assert on a public blockchain that your vote, without anyone else knowing what other kind of rights you have, what other kind of things you have in your identity wallet, whatever, only that you have the rights to vote on that particular thing. And so DAOs are going to be full of situations where some people have the rights to vote on something and other people don't have the rights to vote on something. I mean, if you just think about what it, just a typical vote situation. I mean, we all live in different voting districts. We all have different representatives and things. I mean, that is a sort of basis, in my mind, it's a sort of basis for the transition of this new world that we're talking about here. The basis of my app is based on this thing called Midnight, which allows zero knowledge proofs and smart contracts and decentralized self-sovereign digital IDs and all that stuff. And so they all have to work together to give us this ability where we can have one person, one vote in a provable way without anyone knowing anything else about you other than that you have the rights to vote at this time in this place and for this particular whatever the thing is that you're voting on. So to me, that's like kind of the basis of it all. And so, eventually we'll get there. And I don't know what we're going to have to go through before that, but
well, when we think about the arguments against identity or authenticity with regards to money, we also need to think about the control that we worry about, say, with debanking and KYCing in one currency is a very different world than in a world with multiple currencies. Because politicians will be late to figuring this out, and that's pretty darn obvious.
Yeah, that's obvious.
But I mean, look at the sanctions that they use to press around the world for various countries. They begin to break down. Money only works whenever money doesn't work as a stick. Money works as a carrot, and that is the maybe the one rule of money. And so these notions of identifying and denying certain uses or the use of a money is actually hurts the system more so than it hurts the users of that system.
Right, but I'm not talking about, when I talk about identity, I'm not talking about denying the use of money. In fact, it kind of doesn't have much to do with that at all, the money part. It simply gives you access in ways that, you have the rights to have access for voting purposes, right? So one person, one vote. But it doesn't, I mean, that's the whole point of a public blockchain, is that everybody has access under any circumstance from anywhere in the world, from wherever they exist, right? And it's ultimately traceable on the public blockchain. I'm not talking about limiting access in that way. However, from an identity perspective, there are things that we will ultimately have the right to vote on, and things we will not have the right to vote on. Like if you're, just take something simple like an HOA. Like here where I live, we have a little HOA, and it's I don't know 10 houses in it or something like that. It's not big, but they have a right as a group. They have a right to vote on things like if we want to raise our fees or something like that, right? And so, we know each other, but once it scales out a little bit, where you have hundreds of people, that may have the rights to vote in an HOA, for example, and you don't know who they are and stuff like that. So the idea is to push the rights down to an identity wallet, and then use those rights to have an application that sort of says, okay, you can vote here at this point in time for this particular thing, right? So it's not an issue of limiting access to money. It's an issue of defining the rights of an individual. And there's going to be elections, for example, where everyone has an equal and completely equanimous, bad word, sort of access to a vote. And I sort of, if I think about that whole concept and I sort of carry it out in my mind from a futurist perspective, it sort of lends itself to this idea of having a government that is more referential. So in other words, it votes on policy. So we get to vote on policy directly, as opposed to, what we have here in the United States is it's a republic,
constitutional republic. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know that we really gave ourselves enough time to talk through this particular topic, but we're at the top of the hour, so we'll have to have Rob back again and kind of dissect this a bit more, because the intersection of rights and how we can use cryptocurrencies and the financial rails, or even the rails that have been set up by cryptocurrency and distributed ledger technology is something that we didn't quite allocate enough time to. But Rob, always great to have you on the show. Love that you could help us catch up with some of the stuff that's happening in Cardano, and we'll definitely look forward to having you back on again soon.
Yeah, cool. Let's pick the conversation up maybe next time with HOAs, because I think that's a brilliant paradigm and a great place to think about the intersection of decentralized blockchains, decentralized ledgers, and government. So great time today, Rob, and enjoyed it, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.